Hello and welcome to the Smart Connections podcast and the Talk the Path podcast. My name is Anna Sanderlin. I am a warm-line facilitator for the University of Memphis Smart Center. The University of Memphis School of Social Work Smart Research, Training, and Treatment Center aims to provide evidence-based interventions for school-based mental health programming, increase access for school-based behavioral health programming in underserved areas, offer training on best practices in telebehavioral health, develop opportunities to research the use of technology in practice, and provide direct services to the state's most vulnerable populations. You can call the Smart Center at 901-678-1636. The University of Memphis Smart Center, in conjunction with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, would like to present the Pathways to Behavioral Health Careers Project. The goals of the Pathways Project are to provide education and information on the various career opportunities in the field of behavioral health through presentations, increase interest in students in the field of behavioral health, provide opportunities for guidance with information regarding college, university programming that result in degrees for professions in the field of behavioral health, connect students with students in behavioral health programs and professionals in the field for further research. This podcast will feature students and professionals in the field to give a clear picture of the daily duties of these roles and how they help support their communities.
My name is Eliza Galvez. I am a licensed social worker currently in the state of Tennessee. I'm doing PhD program at the College of Social Work. I'm a second-year student. Prior to that, I received my bachelor's in psychology at Georgia State University, and then went on to do my master's at Kennesaw State University with a clinical concentration. Am I missing anything else?
I don't think so.
That's it.
Where,
Awesome.
So the next question is just going to be, can you tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now? So what made you decide that this is what you wanted to do? How did you get into the programs that you're in, and maybe a little bit of the research that you're doing if you're in the middle of any research that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a long journey for sure. Like I said, I come from a psychology background, but of course, coming into college, that didn't start that way. Being from a Latino family, they were just like, you got to go STEM, you got to be a doctor, a dentist. So originally the plan was I was majoring in biology, and then I realized I didn't like it. And so I started taking electives that just sounded interesting, and psychology was very interested. So once I got comfortable with that, I reached out. The university provided just some communications to reach out, organizations to reach out to for internships. So I did an internship with an outpatient treatment center for court-mandated clients. And I found that I really, really loved that. I was a co-facilitator for a lot of the group sessions, predominantly those who had substance misuse, court-mandated citations, I guess you would say, and then as well family violence intervention program. And so then that's when I made the switch to psychology. And throughout that, did a couple of more internships. One with an agency called Latino. As a Latina, I really wanted to get involved with the community, and that was a domestic violence agency that helped out Latinos and families. And so then in the midst of that, I also got involved in some research, mainly by accident, just because they were looking for someone bilingual, and I was just, I happened to be the only bilingual that professor had in the class, and found that I really liked that. But of course, then after graduating from Georgia State with my bachelor's, I took more of the clinical route. I was a behavioral therapist for children with behavioral and developmental disorders, so mainly children with autism and ADHD as well, providing applied behavior analysis techniques. I did that for a bit, but then went pretty much straight into my master's because you cannot really you just gotta you want to make some bank, you gotta keep on
Yeah.
getting the higher education, of course, if you're able to.
Mhm.
And luckily I was able to. And so I went in with the idea of a clinical route in mind. And in the midst of that master's program, they also, some of them, not all, but our institution offered graduate research assistantships. I was lucky enough to secure that, which helped with being able to afford the master's program. And that
Mhm.
is really what got me interested into research. I had a fabulous mentor who was Latina as well and focused on nonprofit program evaluations, and just work with nonprofits in general that are focused on integration services for Latinos and immigrants. Um, and so that is where I got in a lot of the work for research, predominantly just, assisting with sort of the literature part of it, not necessarily doing interviews or anything like that. It was more so on the side. And then that connection I had with her, she was able to refer me the following year during the second year of my master's to another colleague that was looking for a bilingual research assistant, um, which helped with that, getting that master's. It wasn't a financial burden, fortunately, because of
Mhm.
that. But it also really sparked that love for research, um, which was great. A little uncommon because in the master's program, everyone is mostly in that master's program, everyone was pretty much in for clinical work. And we, of course,
Mhm.
had our field placements. And so I was um, at a child agency, and then I was at a hospital system for sure. And I loved it, but I found that my love was a bit more towards research and was navigating communicating with faculty and my previous mentors about that I was interested in research, but of course felt conflicted because everyone was just interested in clinical work, and I didn't. It feels weird, almost a little bit out of place. Um, but luckily, I had supportive faculty that pushed me toward that direction and helped give me the resources needed to sort of pursue that. Because I did found that that's mostly where my passion lied. Um, and that got me to where I am today, pretty much. I'm making it sound easier than it really was, but
It always sounds easier. It
it
always
always
sounds
sounds
easier than it is.
easier. Yes, but it certainly wasn't, especially, um, coming to an area that I'm not familiar with, even though Georgia is not, too different. I was from Metro Atlanta area, which is a bit more diverse. And so it was an interesting experience to just come in here. And specifically with my research, my of course stems from my previous experiences with clients, particularly since even though I lived in a diverse part of Georgia, I was still oftentimes, I think, like one of two of Spanish speaking people there. And so, of course, I was always put with the Latino clients, the immigrant clients, the non speaking clients. Um, and so, my current research focuses on the mental health and well being of Latinos and immigrants, specifically focused on culturally responsive and trauma responsive care to inform service provision so that we can help providers be more culturally sensitive and work through a more culturally informed lens because it is important, and not just for Latinos or immigrants, but any other person from a culturally diverse background.
Mhm.
So that is where my research lies. And currently, I also engage in community presentations here in East Tennessee for providers, just to sort of get that information out there. That is in addition to my research and the work that I do, um, which is very in depth, and I'm happy to get into that. But my passion for sure is with the community. So any chance I get to do these presentations, engage with Latino serving agencies here like Centro Hispano or Ola Lakeway, that is what I'm always pushing my my efforts towards it a bit more. So doing research, but also trying to get that community piece as much as I can, because if you're doing research on a community, it's important to stay in touch with that community and not just work from, the computer doing research. It's community engagement is critical in research. So that's a little bit.
I like that. Our next question is, did you know you always wanted to do what you're doing? And I think it's interesting to hear you say that. I mean, you started somewhere completely different. You started, and like everybody in your master's was very, clinically based, and going after all of their clinical work. And so that's when you sort of diverged. And I think it's interesting to hear you talk about like how you branched off like that. Did you, I am going to change this question a little bit. Did you always know, I mean, obviously hearing you talk about it, being Latina and like your culture is very important to you. Did you always know you wanted that to be a main part of your research, or is that something that, you sort of realized later when you were, I mean, I feel like when we're young, we don't always know, especially very young, we don't always know exactly what our place is in all the things that we're doing. So when would you say you knew that you wanted your culture and being Latina to be such a big part of the research that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's a really great question. I think for sure, for the most part, that's a really interesting question, because I want to say yes, that I feel like I have always wanted to serve the community in general, but also my community as well. But I also think because I was in my institutions, particularly Kennesaw, which is it is not as diverse as Georgia State, which is in Atlanta, downtown Atlanta. It's a bit more of a predominantly white institution. And so in all of my field placements, I really was like one of two of the Spanish speaking people there. And so I've always wanted to serve my community, but I also think just being one of the few people in there definitely navigated me towards that path, because it's just who I've always been surrounded by. Of course, further on, I do not just surround myself with Latinos, of course, but definitely it is an important part of me. It is an important part of my research, and that I think stems from that. So I'm not saying that my institution pushed me towards that, because they just didn't have many people from culturally diverse backgrounds, but it does make an impact, I think. But I want to say for sure that going into a helping profession, I did have my community always in mind.
Okay. I like that. That's very interesting to hear. And it's interesting to hear you talk about it. I feel like, I don't have that, I've always, doing this and being in this, I've also felt, very drawn to helping community, but I feel like mine has not been so clear for me until very recently. So I think it's interesting to hear you talk about it.
Clarity of focus is always, an amazing driver of effort. And it sounds like you were able to have that and pair it with good resources, so those are really good, notable things to, because everybody doesn't have access to them, and everybody's not aware of them, the opportunities that go beyond whatever the traditional academic field people are used to hearing and seeing. So it's really good to hear you say that you had support to kind of expand out in that way, that people recognize, the different talents that you brought, but still allowed you the freedom of choice to navigate. So, I really enjoyed hearing you speak about that so passionately. The next question we kind of had was, if you go back in time, would you choose a different pathway? It sounds like your pathway was paved in gold. No, I'm just kidding. But was there anything in the journey that you, learned from, and you were like, well, I really didn't need to learn that lesson, or anything you would do differently? Why not?
And so just to clear, so anything I would do differently to get me to where I'm at, or to get me in a different spot?
To get you where you currently are. And if there's anything that you would, like a missed opportunity or something you think is important to propel you forward, feel free to speak on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. Yeah, I definitely want to say reaching out more for sure. It's uncomfortable, and especially my secondary, like my middle school and high school experience was a little more complicated because I did not excel academically, and I had teachers who were, not that they weren't supportive, but they just kind of disregard. Like, I remember going into the counselor's office and my GPA was very low, and they were just like, oh, okay, so community college. And I was just like, yeah. And you internalize that. And so it was hard because when I got into college, and until this day, I still have a lot of imposter syndrome. Just that stems from that earlier experiences, even though I'm in a very wonderful position now. It's still a struggle, and it's uncomfortable once you decide that you want to move on into higher education. It's an uncomfortable experience to reach out, just because. And I'm very lucky in the sense that I had supportive parents. Like, if in the Latino community, my parents were also immigrants, so they were just like, you gotta be a doctor, do what you can, like do what you can. And so when I didn't, I struggled with that a lot, because I was just like, oh, I'm not going to be a doctor. And I know maybe psychology and mental health is still stigmatized in many communities, especially the Latino community. So I was very fearful to even talk to my family about that. But fortunately, when I did, they were just like, we're here, and you don't have to do what we want you to do. We just want you to be happy and to be in a much better place than we were. And not everybody has that support. And so even though I had that support, still struggling with that, feeling comfortable to reach out to other faculty or just other organizations. Like, it's there, it's available. Like, I remember it was like an easy search for me to find the internships, for example, but it's still just so, well, at least for me, it was very uncomfortable to talk to people that I was interested in doing more, just because of that imposter syndrome. So one thing I would do differently, I definitely wish I would have reached out more, because in both my universities, there was a lot of support that I don't think I just did enough, or I didn't know about. And I think if I would have, I think I would have benefited a bunch in just learning, what opportunities are good for me. What are the options if I do want to do my master's or PhD? Because I had to do all of that myself because my family didn't know. A lot of my friends did not know. And none of my friends decided to do their PhD because they love to relax and they care about their health. And so navigating that by yourself is difficult, but there is support there usually in a lot of places. And I think just navigating that is a difficult and kind of lonely experience. Something I wish I would have done differently, for sure.
That's interesting. I very much relate to the imposter syndrome, but also we live in the same life. But also just like knowing I cared very much about school, like in middle school, but in high school, I was very interested in, like the friendships took a toll. If we like all the social stuff takes a toll, and all the extracurriculars take a toll. So my grades and my mental health was not very good in high school. So I was not very interested in that. So by the time I got to senior year, my GPA was not where I wanted it to be. And I remember counselors just pushing and pushing for things that I did not want. Like we didn't need 4 science credits in high school. But so when I said, I don't want to take another science class because I don't like them, I'm not good at them. And they were just pushing so hard that I do this thing that I knew would not be good for me. So it's a very different environment when you get to college and you're around more people who are interested, like very interested in what they're doing. And it's very cool to see the passion that people have for the things that they are involved in. But I definitely relate to the imposter syndrome and the feeling like any of the success you have is sort of like, you have that little middle schooler back in the back of your mind that's like, I don't really care about school. So do I care now? Like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing now? So I definitely relate very heavily.
Yeah, it's insane how how you just really find yourself going back. Anytime anything good happens, I just go back to feeling small for some reason. And I'm just like, well, I need to see someone for that probably.
When I get done with this PhD, I need
Right. But it does, your experiences when you're younger, particularly in school, because that's where you're at most of the time, they make such a heavy impact on how you navigate the future for sure, especially when you're in college and even beyond.
Definitely. So our final question for you is actually, what would you suggest to young people? So like I told you at the beginning, we're sort of aiming for middle school, high school, that kind of crowd. So what would you suggest to those people who are maybe trying to identify whether or not a possible career in behavioral health, like in that field, is right for them? Do you have any suggestions or any tips or anything you'd want to share to that sort of group?
Yeah, 100%. I would say for sure to talk to those that are there for you. So like the teachers, the counselors, anybody there at the school, just asking them about it. Because even if they themselves are doing anything behavioral health or mental health related, they could probably tell you a bit or give you some information or resources. That was a struggle for me, for all of what I just mentioned, and also because I was just a quieter, more reserved kid that didn't like to inconvenience anyone with my my concerns or with the stuff I want to learn about. And I imagine that's how a lot of kids feel, but that is what teachers and staff and counselors, that's really what they're there for. And not every experience is a positive one with a teacher or with a provider, but they can definitely give you the right resources. And if not, definitely technology has just grown a lot. And I know that is how I learned how to, even apply for a master's program, apply for a PhD program, for example, because that is just so foreign. There's so many resources online that can help you navigate things or even just learn more about the careers you're interested in. I did not know, for social work, to me, before I started, has always been foster care. That is what I associated with. And I think that is still the case for many people who just aren't aware that social work is very broad and you can do micro, macro work, anything in between. And so getting plugged in as much as you can with those around you and with what is available online, I think will really help for sure. And if you can meet, I know there's a lot of organizations, for example, here in East Tennessee, Centro Hispano, for example, they're a Latino serving agency, and they just have many programs for youth that are interested in post-secondary access, serving families and their children. And I think getting plugged into groups like that is super important. When I was younger, I was so annoying when I was younger because I was just like, there was like clubs that were like Hispanic organization. But I was like, no, I'm not. I was like, I'm not about to do all that. Like, I just want to go home. Like, I don't want to do nothing. But it really builds a sense of community, and they have so many resources, and that is critical. Agencies like Centro Hispano, Way, Turk, Conexión America, Latino Memphis as well. Those are agencies that can help you get plugged in, help families get plugged in so they can help their kids in navigating that, because it is tough when your parents feel like they're not able to help you. And so getting plugged in with those organizations in some way, I think is critical, because they can definitely offer the resources maybe in a way that is comfortable for children from different backgrounds, for sure. So those are just some of the ways. There's more for sure, but those are the top that come to my head.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. I definitely know that there are things that even when I was looking into what I wanted to do, there were probably organizations and things that even if I had just spent, a little bit of time looking into it and trying to find groups that made the transition a little bit easier, it would have helped. So I appreciate that answer. That's good. Well, we don't have any other questions for you. But this has been great. It's great to meet you. Thank you for agreeing to come on here and talk about your work a little bit and what you do. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. I hope the information I shared was beneficial and useful. I'm really excited to see what you guys do with it. And like I mentioned, I do a lot of presentations for providers and for staff on being just more culturally and trauma responsive. So if you guys ever need anything in that regard, that is something that I'm passionate about. So that's something I do for free. I probably shouldn't say that, but I do. I do because it's important. So if you guys ever need anything, please do feel free to reach out, or just if students that have questions or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. I hope you guys have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to listen to our podcast, brought to you by the Smart Connections podcast from the Smart Center at the University of Memphis, as well as the Pathways to Behavioral Health Careers Project. If you or anyone you know needs any information from the Smart Center, please contact us at 901-678-1636 or email us at smartcenter@memphis.edu. You can also learn more about us at our website, memphis.edu/smartcenter.